When I was a kid, I had a habit of raiding my father's record collection on a regular basis. So one rainy Saturday in my hometown of Greenville, South Carolina, I found, sandwiched between Barry Manilow and Sesame Street Fever, a Theodore Bikel record. I put it on and I was mesmerized. His music connects me to my Jewishness and to my family in deep and meaningful ways. And I'm very honored to be here tonight to introduce Mr. Bikel. Folk singer, theater, film and television actor, radio host, president of Actors Equity Association, political activist, Jewish spokesman, and author are some of the many careers to which Mr. Bikel can lay claim. He has enjoyed a diverse musical career in folk, opera, orchestral Yiddish, and Israeli music. As an actor, he had the privilege of marrying Mary Martin every night as the original Captain Von Trapp in The Sound of Music. Most notably, he set the record for playing Tevye in Fiddler on the Roof over 2,000 times. Now, I've played Perchik myself once, that's not quite the same. Born in 1924 in Vienna, Theodore Bikel was 13 when he and his parents left Austria for Palestine. Fluent in Hebrew, Yiddish, and German, he intended to study comparative linguistics, but was drawn to the theater instead. In 1943, he joined Habima Theater and went on to graduate with honors from London's Royal Academy of Dramatic Art. Mr. Bikel made his film debut in The African Queen, starring Humphrey Bogart and Katharine Hepburn. Since then, he has appeared in more than 40 films, including the Defiant Ones, for which he received an Academy Award nomination. His range as an actor is truly remarkable. He's played a Chinese crook, Scottish police officer, and a Greek peanut vendor. He has even appeared on The Twilight Zone, Star Trek, and Babylon 5 as a space rabbi. He is also co-author and co-star of the musical plays Sholom Aleichem Lives and Sholom Aleichem Laughter Through Tears. And now, it gives me great pleasure to bring to the stage Mr. Theodore Bikel.
So what else is new?
So, I'd like to start with Tevye, of course, and I would very much like to know, what is your favorite moment in Fiddler on the Roof, having done it over 2,000 times?
Difficult to say because there are so many favorite moments in Fiddler. Probably the one when Hodel says goodbye at the railroad station. It's a very haunting moment when Tevye asks God, he knows he's never going to see his daughter again, but he asks God to take care of her and see that she dresses warm because she goes to Siberia. That's one moment. The other one is when he has to tell Chava that he cannot accept her, that a person, it's interesting, it's a paradigm actually of what we Jews are about in modern times. He was forgiving his eldest daughter Tzeitel for marrying a pauper, even though that would make for a very hard life for her and for the family. He was willing to accept his second daughter, who's marrying a socialist revolutionary, but still a Jew, and she's going to marry him under a chuppah. But he cannot. The breaking point comes when Chava wants to marry a Gentile, and he doesn't even know whether she's going to convert. In those days, they had to, actually. But she is dead to him, and he was sitting shivered. And then the rest of the play is about, can he ever find forgiveness? Can he find acceptance of this daughter? Now, that's in Fiddler. In the Tevye stories that Sholom Aleichem wrote, there's far greater tragedy. His youngest daughter, Sprinze, falls in love with a very rich boy, and the rich boy is spirited away by his family, and the girl drowns herself in the river. Now, there is a great deal of tragedy in Tevye, in Sholom Aleichem, and as you will see in the film, as Michael Weck says, the tragedy and the comedy are indissolubly linked to each other. You cannot have one without having the other.
So the Sholom Aleichem stories have obvious appeal for Jews. What do you think is the appeal for a broader audience?
In the beginning, they thought, once you're going to run out of a Jewish audience, you're going to run out of an audience. That's going to be it. That's going to be it. How wrong they were. Why? Because the better a piece of literature is, the better a piece of theater is, the more universal it becomes. I've said this very often. No matter how small or how narrow the canvas is on which it is painted, ethnically, culturally, geographically, it does not matter. It does not. A great piece of theater is a great piece of theater and universally accepted. You don't have to be Jewish to enjoy it. You don't have to be Jewish to even understand it, except that you get viscerally the notion that Tevye is not just a simple milkman in the Pale of Settlement, but Tevye is every man.
Can you talk a little bit about your craft? So when you're working on a song, say, how do you go about that? What steps do you take to work on a song?
Well, I'm the kind of performer, the kind of singer who picks and chooses what feels good to me. I'm not a professor of folklore. I am not a person who collects everything that exists. There are people who do that. There are people who publish everything that there is, and it's right that they should do that. But it's a scholarly enterprise. I'm not a scholar. I'm a performer. I perform what sits good in my mouth and in my head. And if it speaks to me, and if it causes that kind of warm feeling in me, I hope to be able to transmit that to an audience. I sing in many languages, some of whom I do not speak at all, but I have to understand what it is that I sing, because if I don't understand it, you won't either.
So I just have one more question, and we'll turn it over to the audience for some questions. So you worked with Laurence Olivier on Streetcar Named Desire. Can you talk a little bit about that experience?
Laurence Olivier was an extraordinary performer. He was the king of the British theatre, and his wife Vivienne Leigh was the queen of the British theatre. And she played Blanche in Streetcar Named Desire. Now, to be directed by Laurence Olivier was the most daunting experience of my life as an actor. Why? Because he was impatient as a director. And a director guides you to where he wants you to go. Olivier showed you. He acted it out for you. And you knew you couldn't do it that way. Or that well. And it was the most disconcerting experience. But you did your best. You did what you needed to do. And eventually, when I took over the role of Mitch in Streetcar opposite Vivienne Leigh, maybe on the fourth or fifth day, the stage manager said to me, you know, Laurence Olivier, Larry came last night and he saw the first act of the play. And I said to him, oh, did he say anything? And the stage manager said, not a word, don't push your luck.
So we'd like to turn it over to you for some questions. The folks in the yellow shirts have some microphones, so if you have a question, just raise your hand and they'll make their way over to you.
This isn't really a question, it's a thank you. About 10 years ago or so, you were at the Jewish Center. And I took a gentleman, an elderly gentleman who had just come over from Russia. All he could speak was Russian and Yiddish. And you had a magnificent performance of Russian folk songs and Yiddish folk songs. And it was almost as much fun watching him as it was you, because he was singing along with you and smiling and bouncing up and down. And it was just a wonderful gift that you gave to him. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I do a lot of Russian. It speaks to me. Everything I do speaks to me, actually. Anybody?
Anything else?
You know, it's kind of unusual. We're doing question and answers about a movie that you haven't seen yet.
Mr. Bikel, can you translate, since you speak or sing in many different languages, Viddy Viddy Bum, and where that derived from?
Biddy Biddy Bum is a very deep lyric that is used widely in Yiddish folklore when you have to fill in between one set of texts that you know and another set of texts that you know, and in the middle there's something that's needed, and Biddy Bum fills that bill admirably.
Anyone else? Any more questions? Please.
Yes, somebody's raising their hand.
I remember you as Zoltan Karpathy.
Speak up, speak up. I'm old.
Okay. I remember you as Zoltan Karpathy, that dreadful Hungarian.
Yes.
That's when I first knew about you.
Zoltan Karpathy in My Fair Lady was the language expert whom they all fooled at the ball into thinking that she was not only a flower girl, but of noble birth, and what's more, she was Hungarian. You know, Zoltan Karpathy in the lyric of My Fair Lady is described as the hairy hound from Budapest. And I figured out the only way that happened was because they needed to rhyme it for I never saw a Rudapest.
Hi, Mr. Bikel, thanks for coming. If you had to do it all over again, would you change anything?
If I had to do it all over again, would I change anything? First of all, it's a futile enterprise, you can't. And secondly, I'm one of the few people who would change very little in what happened in my life, what I did, and even what I omitted to do. It all informed what it is that I was, what it is that I am, and for better or worse, what it is that I will be remembered for. So no, I don't want to change anything retroactively or proactively.
Since we haven't seen the movie yet, is there anything you'd like to do to prep us for it and make us extra aware of anything?
Oh, preparation for the movie. The movie is my legacy. It is the sum total of much not all, much of what I worked toward, and that is my journey in life, which actually, as an intellectual, began round about the age of my bar mitzvah, at a time when I lived in Vienna and the Nazis marched in. And it's an arc from then through times in then what was then Palestine, which is Israel now, through England, and through the last over 50 years in the United States of America. All of that, in one way or another, is in the film as my journey. Concomitant with that is everything was always accompanied by Sholom Aleichem. My life as a Jew, as an intellectual, as a literate Jew in Yiddish would be unthinkable without Sholom Aleichem. And so what you will see is these two elements coming together, even though they were not contemporaries. Sholom Aleichem died in 1916, and I was born in 1924. And yet, my life and his were and are intertwined.
We have time for one more question. Just one more.
I'm wondering if you still enjoy singing, and if so, if you could sing something for us.
That is not a question, it's a request. I know the difference between... All right, I will do something a cappella, or as we call it in the folk field, Acapulco. And it was a song that was smuggled from the Soviet Union to me in New York at the time. And the words say, I do not fear anyone, and I do not believe in anyone except in God alone. Nie bojuся nikogo I nie wierzę nikomu, tylko Bogu одному. Nie bojuся nikogo I nie wierzę nikomu, tylko Bogu одному. Нет, нет никого, кроме Его одного, только Бога одного. Нет, нет никого, кроме Его одного, только Бога одного. Нет, нет никого, кроме Его одного, только Бога одного. Нет, нет никого, кроме Его одного, только Бога одного. Нет, нет, не боюсь никого, только Бога одного. Нет, нет, не боюсь никого, только Бога